often see conversations online at this time of year about PD books worth reading over the summer. Maybe your PLC is looking for a good read, or you want to take something awesome with you on a plane ride or road trip, along with a stack of Emily Henry novels and A Man Called Ove? I'm never totally sure. Which, by the way, I'm giving my own personal Read of the Year award to. I loved that book. Or maybe you're not looking for a PD book, which I totally get too. If you'd like to take the next 5 weeks totally away and renew your energy and creativity and health and not even think about the classroom, that's great too. That's another way to help yourself be a good teacher next year. Totally valid. But just in case you are looking for a book, it just so happens that I have some recommendations. Because I read 17 books about teaching this year, watched myriad YouTube videos on creativity and design, and listened to a lot of education podcasts. So let me break down some of my favorites for you. Welcome to the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast, a podcast for English teachers looking for more. More creativity, more engagement, more joy, and no more scripted curriculum, lesson planning ruts, or boring book lists. I'm Betsy Potash, and I'm honored you're trusting me to help. You're not alone on this creative journey anymore. Let's start by talking about some books that are focused on creativity. After all, this is the Spark Creativity Teacher Podcast. Of all the books I explored, 3 stood out as being really focused on creativity in the classroom. One through a deep dive into the science of creativity. That one was called The Creativity Choice. One through a wide-ranging exploration of creativity in action in classroom settings around the world. That one was called Creative Schools. And one about how to approach designing spaces to empower creativity. That one was called Make Space. Each of these 3 books is really different, but if I had to pick a favorite, it would probably be The Creativity Choice. This was one of my favorites from the year overall for its incredibly clear, readable breakdown of the research on how creativity works. I'd compare Dr. Pringle, the author who's been a guest on this podcast in the past, to Dr. Brene Brown for the way she translates research and makes it accessible and interesting to read and discuss. Of all my 17, there was just one that was really focused on reading. I didn't realize this until I was looking back, but the truth is I've explored this topic a really lot in the past, so maybe that's why I kind of steered in other directions. But that one book was really great. That was called Just Read It by Jared Amato. I loved his perspective on the power of choice reading and the way he blends it together with whole class work. That's also the approach I like to take to choice reading. He has galvanized such an incredible community around choice reading with his organization Project Lit. And I love following along on Instagram, finding ideas for new books to recommend, to read, to put in the classroom libraries. This book provides strong supporting language for the power of choice, which is always helpful, and a lot of specific actionable plans for incorporating choice reading into your curriculum, into your classroom. There's a lot of nuts and bolts. It's super actionable. That's what I'm looking for a lot of the time in a PD book. A big part of Jared Amato's unique angle is in the read and wrap format that he uses. So he always includes like a short post-reading activity to get kids talking and processing their reading before moving on. This book, Just Read It, follows in the trajectory of authors like Donald Miller, Pernell Rip, Nancy Atwell, Penny Kittle, and more reading pioneers who want to see kids reading books that they want to read voluminously and with delight. I would highly recommend this book. Okay, next up, let's talk about some books that challenge norms. A lot of the books I read this year called out problems in the system. We're all aware that there are a ton of problems in the education system. Sometimes when I read books that call out problems, I feel really galvanized and excited to do something about it. Sometimes I feel frustrated that a book is spending 200 or 300 pages explaining to me what a huge problem education has and doesn't really give me an action step. I find that frustrating. I sort of want to have my 10 hours back to try to do something about the problem instead of read all about the problem. But it is, of course, important for us to have context, to understand the problems in the system, to understand like the historical roots of a lot of the problems. And so, you know, to each their own, right? I did read a lot of books that both called out problems and started to provide solutions. It's a whole range. Of all the books I read that challenged norms, my favorite and the one that affected me the most was Felicia Rose Chavez's book, The Anti-Racist Writing Workshop. This one I felt like presented a really clear problem, some of which I was aware of and some of the depth of which was very nuanced and parts of it were new to me. And I appreciated getting additional perspective, but I also really appreciated the actionable nature of the book. So Chavez presents this idea that in writing workshop, the way we often run it, and she's coming from a college perspective, but I think you can easily make the case that this is applicable to high school, that when we run writing workshop and a student presents a draft and then we let somebody else look at that draft and critique it based on kind of their own aesthetics and their own experience in English, the risk we run, the risk that we have is that the students may base that aesthetic on a largely white literary canon that they've been presented with. And so the process of writing workshop becomes like, oh, this writing isn't that much like the writing that I've read, which is very largely from one perspective throughout history, and so it's bad. And so you should change it like this, to be more like the literary canon, to be more like the short stories and essays and opinion pieces and novels that I've read that were sort of 95% by one demographic, and that's like shutting down all these creative voices, making many students feel unheard, unseen. And so there's two solutions to that. And she also presents a lot of nuanced additional supporting details for these solutions. But the kind of two big things are, obviously the canon needs to be much broader, include many more contemporary voices, many more voices from across different author backgrounds. And also, when we do workshop, we need to be really careful about saying like, hey, feel free to just say whatever you want about people's writing. Feel free to say why you liked it, what you think should change, because maybe that's not going to be good for the writer. You know, maybe we should give the writer a lot more agency over the workshop process, where the writer can say, okay, I love my draft. I'm really excited about how I'm sharing my voice, but I do have some concerns about this transition, or I would like all of your perspective on how I did the conclusion, or whatever. When the writer directs the workshop, then they're allowed to like hear what they actually want to hear, what they're interested in, and also build confidence in their own voice. Whereas if they just present their draft and everybody just kind of takes a wrecking ball to it, that's not necessarily the best way to encourage originality and creativity and new voices in the world of writing. And of course, we want to encourage originality and new voices in the world of writing. So, I would really recommend the Anti-Racist Writing Workshop. I thought it was wonderful. Okay, next up, the writing books. I read, 8 different writing books this year. I liked a lot of them. Maybe I even liked all of them in kind of different ways, but I know you're probably not going to have time to read all 8. And so what I'm going to say is the one I recommend the most is John Warner's book, Why They Can't Write. I enjoyed this book so much. John Warner has been a college composition professor for many, many years, just taught hundreds and hundreds of freshmen in college how to write. And so he has this unique perspective. He's taking all these kids who have just graduated from high school, but who are struggling with their writing, and helping get them to the level that they need to be for college. And so he's seen what's not working. He's experimented with a ton of things to try to help it work. And he has like a really wonderful voice, at least for me. I mean, the subtitle of this book is Killing the 5-Paragraph Essay and Other Necessities. And I found myself just really nodding along and seeing his point about the weak writing that students can fall into when they really get stuck and sort of this is the format, you have to do it exactly like this and always like this, and they they're not showing their voice, they're not showing their expertise, they're not excited about the writing. So anyway, he presents like a kind of breakdown of some issues, but he also presents a lot of fun tweaks and ideas for how you can build a writing curriculum that does work. And it's based on just a plethora of experience. And so I thought that one was great. Another one that I really enjoyed, just a very quick read. You can almost just read like a third of it and get the strong sense of it, is Penny Kittle's Micro Mentor Texts. And in this very actionable book, she takes all these wonderfully diverse excerpts from texts all across contemporary literature and just unpacks how she would use them as a mentor text in the classroom. And so if you've been hearing for years like, oh, use mentor texts, oh, teach writing with mentor texts, and you've kind of been cobbling it together as you go, but you haven't really had a chance to see somebody do it who's really good at it, and you just don't feel like really confident in your approach, it's fun to just see her exact approach. She's been doing it for so long with so much success, and it's like, hey, wow, it's nice to just know this is how Penny Kittle does it. I could try that too. And then you can, tweak it to suit your own needs. Use the mentor text you want to use. But again, I just appreciate the window into her classroom and sort of the exact step-by-step. I always like an actionable book. Okay. So we've skated through a lot of the book categories now, besides sort of the general all 17 books that I read. But I feel like on a podcast, I just don't want to tell you them all. I did create a graphic that shows all 17, which I'll drop into the show notes so that you can see them all. And then in the full blog post, I kind of broke down tiny little summary reviews for the different texts, but I just think it's too much here to go through all 17. So last but not least here, I want to talk about some of the multimodal PD that I had a chance to consume this year, because I also found some gems there in the multimodal world. And I think that's really important for our students too. So I don't want to ignore it here. Books are not the only place we can learn. I know you know. Probably my absolute favorite multimodal consumption PD this year was the Stanford Masters of Creativity channel. This is something I started watching in the fall. In the Stanford Design School YouTube, there's one playlist called the Masters of Creativity, and that's where I started, and I listened to a lot of the videos on walks and runs, and then I saw that there were versions that were specifically for education, and I listened to more, and then I realized that there was a full channel, the Stanford Masters of Creativity channel, separate from the Stanford Design School Masters of Creativity playlist, and it has even more videos. I have certainly not watched them all. I've probably watched about 10, but they're each like an hour long, so there's a lot there to explore, to consume. I use them as podcasts, basically. I would look down at the screen every once in a while when the speaker was like, in this illustration, you can really see blah, blah, blah. And then I would peek down and try to see what they were talking about. But mostly I felt like it worked as a podcast, which really fits into my life a lot better than a video. So I would recommend going to explore the Stanford Masters of Creativity channel if you're looking for just really interesting perspective on how to develop creativity for yourself, for your students. I loved it, found it really interesting. Another video series that I was interested in was by Dr. Punya Mishra, and he is a professor at Arizona State, and he's really a pioneer of creativity and design in education. And this video series is super short. It's 6 videos. They're each just a few minutes. It's meant to be so fast and simple to consume, but it's called 6 videos on the 5 spaces for design in education. And what I appreciate about them was how he just lasered in on how standardized tests have not been designed to help our students. They've been designed to help politicians make snap decisions about education and give them fast stats that they can use. And I found his language really helpful, just as a baseline for me in conversation when I'm trying to explain to people my problems with standardized testing. I think he was trying really hard to break down, so much research and learning and thinking and discussion into just this really clear, hey, what happens when we design an education to create a test, like when we design education around a test instead of designing education for like other types of goals, right? So anyway, I thought they were interesting. I would recommend. 3 podcasts I listened to this year that were all new to me this year were Edutopia's new School of Practice podcast. I listened to several episodes, really enjoyed them, especially the one called The Extraordinary Impact of Drawing to Learn. That one was so good. I was intrigued and listened to the entire show, I think, of Curriculum Encounters out of Columbia Teachers College. That one was really fun. Just very unique perspective. They were trying to look at how curriculum is reflected in classroom spaces, and that's something that's really interesting to me. So it's a little bit niche. And then I listened to the whole show out of the New York Times and the producers of Serial called White Parents, which was looking at a case study in New York City about sort of what happened at one school when a group of parents came in from a white background, white demographic, and like had a vision to just radically change the school, and how that affected the students and families who were already there. And then sort of what happened after that. And it also sort of roots that school in the history, its history, and all the different changes that happened before this change. And just, it's a very interesting look at some of the cycles that happen in education. And also just gives this really strong sense of like how important it is to work together in community when trying to create change in education. So anyway, that one was really interesting. I just finished that one last week, so it's really kind of fresh in my mind. Okay, my friend, there we go. I read 17 PD books this year, so you don't have to. You've got my top recommendations. I'd always love to hear yours too. Until next time, take care of yourself and stay creative.